Hi. Thank you all for coming out to the Mount Washington Valley Housing Coalition's 2025 Affordable Housing Charrette. We're here to listen to you, take public comment tonight, and bring your comments to life in the project along with the expertise from this group.
I'm hoping we can balance community wants and zoning, but kind of push zoning in ways that we want to see it change.
This property is going to be super interesting because we're actually doing two properties. We're doing the property next to the hospital, which is 9.5 acres. That's commercial property, and then we're doing the property off at the end of Remote Trail, which is 2.8 acres, which is not commercial, it's residential property.
So you see the setback line is...
Oh, I see, the overall.
The charrettes are an amazing tool, and you get to look at all the possibilities, like forgetting about the zoning that's currently on the books in that space, like what could potentially happen in the space. And we definitely, in Conway, we have seen zoning changes based on the outcomes of charrettes.
So we changed a bunch of regulations this year, primarily around density and trying to make sites easier and less expensive to develop when it's providing the housing that the community wants, which is affordable and long-term.
Affordable housing is not one size fits all. You've got to have different programs, you've got to be utilizing it in different ways, and then when you can kind of put together a more comprehensive full scale of, we need transitional supportive housing to get people off the streets and get that and keep them safe.
Yeah.
We also need a house for, the cardiologist who wants to move to the area, and like it's full spectrum. And
So Ryan, would we be able to call this a driveway all the way to this point if it's 600 feet with these other pieces coming off of it?
I can see this working as this actually connects as just an emergency access road, and then this is a driveway.
So that's my thought.
This site is great because it's right on the highway and it has infrastructure. Last year we were working with a site that didn't, and the infrastructure is so important. If you don't have the water and sewer, it's just very, very difficult and expensive to build the kind of density.
And I would think of it almost as, a village extension, and also incorporating different housing typologies is really important, and meeting different demands and demographics.
Homes that are available for our local people and not so much the second home market. ADUs, incentives. Instead of having to fight with a town, if you could get an ADU and get a little tax break, that'd be super.
I would lean towards starter homes because I feel that young folks starting off, if there's a reasonable price starter home, the money they put into rentals is not lost. Therefore, they put in a starter home, they can build some equity and move on. That's my biggest concern about the cost of building more rentals. It sort of stagnates people. They have a chance they can't, as you said, they can't create wealth because they're paying the rent.
And that's what people don't understand, that if we create the $350,000 house or $450,000 house, we create enough of them, there will be movement.
I know what I bought my house for 34 years ago, and our kids can't even come close to that type of, opportunity.
So affordable housing isn't necessarily low income. It's locals needing places to live, and it's our workforce that needs affordable housing. So it's not necessarily low income, it's us.
Housing is important to our community hospital for recruitment. So if we can't find a place for providers to stay, our patients have a difficult time getting in, which means care is delayed, and that doesn't help us with our best outcomes. So the overall well-being of our community depends upon us being able to find housing.
We're a tool of the people, and that's what we're trying to continuously do. And if a problem isn't brought to our attention, we don't know we need to fix it. So
people that I have worked with personally have said specifically, Kevin, Conway and North Conway is a great place, but we will never do a project here again because of the cost of the government, of the town oversight, and it's a crime.
I do think that at some point in time in the very near future, we need to start attaching costs to things, because what inevitably happens is that, and I think this is my 12th charrette, is we come up with a great first design and it doesn't work in any circumstance whatsoever, and we start all over again.
I know there's probably some concerns with if we increase affordable housing, it would put strains on the community infrastructure. But the truth is this community serves tens of thousands of people every weekend and throughout the summer. So from a memorial perspective, we have the capacity We flex with that, so we have the capacity to serve these people, and I'm certain that our colleagues around the community do too.
I think we need to get more of the people who are on the Board of Selectmen and the zoning people of all the communities more involved.
We're not a farming community anymore. We're not logging as much as we used to. We are in the resort industry. And there's probably a path that has been done. I know my friends in Breckenridge have lived in a place that they bought, and there's some math equation that when they go to sell it, they have to sell it like Josh had said.
It's like maddening what they're doing out west compared to what we're not doing here. And it's really through tourism dollars that revenue is generated.
Like creating housing inventory that is available for everybody all the time and not to be gobbled up by somebody else who made short-term rental or second home is the key for me. I don't care if that house is $400,000 or $200,000 or $500,000 or $600,000. If we have inventory that is deed restricted for long-term ownership or long-term rental, then people are going to move into it.
So for this project, I think we actually have to be more restrictive than the town. The one where you say you have to live in it for 9 months, that's the deed restriction.
Like, this is not a requirement per town zoning. Like, this would have to be a requirement by the developer.
And to me, it's really simple. It's literally on the deed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the HOA is the HOA. The deed states what you can and can't do. It's no different than you can't have livestock. You can't have. That's all in the deed.
We pass all these different regulations, but a lot of times folks just aren't aware of what's changed, and it's hard to publicize what we've done. So I think this is a great opportunity to share what's possible, and hopefully people can take advantage of it.
And we're not done playing with these numbers yet, because it could end up becoming much more viable by 9 o'clock tonight.
What I'm most hopeful for Monday night is for the public to be excited, to see what we've done, be in support of the Housing Coalition, and recognize this missing middle, push for affordable housing, push for that middle gap that we're missing in the valley.
Hi, everybody. For those of you who joined us for our listening session last week, welcome back. Thank you for coming again.
So we took that road away in this revised concept, and we created a pocket park in the center of the site. It'd be much less expensive, and it would be a greater utility for all the residents. And you have really 4 different housing typologies on one site. And then we even thought about integrating with those single-family homes some ADUs, some accessory units.
So what we did is we took the breakdown that you saw, those great pictures, the different types of neighborhoods, and we said, what could we put for prices on those for sales? And so you'll see that we have the $240,000 number, which represents what someone who makes 80% of the median income in the area can afford. At least that's what the federal government says. If you make 80% of the median income in the area, you can afford. It's up to you what your actual expenses are, right? How often you go out and get pizza or whatever.
Deed restrictions used to be a dirty word in the housing world. Now, they're everything.
76% of them would be deed restricted to primary residents only, and that 24% of the units don't have that restriction, but wouldn't be able to be used for short-term rental. So effectively, none of them would be allowed to be used for short-term rental, but 24% of them, in theory, could be bought by someone who's not a full-time resident here. We envisioned that these were expandable as well. We really liked the idea of someone being able to get into a small house and then adding on to it and growing with it over time.
Your total payment is $2,407, which makes you choke a little bit, right? Are you all kind of going, Think about what we said earlier. This is not the most expensive home on this lot, but it's also not the least expensive. It's kind of right up the middle for those low to moderate income borrowers, which are our workers, which are most of us in this room, honestly. That's the reality. It can be done. We see it every day, but a lot of times it's a 2-person household, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's a medical professional who's going to walk to work every day. That's awesome. Now when you show up at the ER, you know you're going to get helped because there's somebody there already.
So the commercial financing works or doesn't work. It's really hard because it doesn't typically work. But we're involved with the developers, the people wanting to do these projects. And the biggest barriers we're finding is it's cost prohibitive. You know, it doesn't matter how much you think you're going to make. it's not going to make enough to support the project. And it's not necessarily the construction cost. A lot of it is regulation. You need to sprinkle it because there's 5 units, or that just makes it so cost prohibitive.
What I would expect is that you would do it in phases, and maybe you do 2 buildings at a time, or you borrow $6 million and do that. And as those units sell, you move on to the next section. So even though it shows $24 million, that we don't expect that anybody's going to walk in the door and say, I need to borrow $24 million.
And we have to kind of remind these developers that it's not Conway's job to make it profitable for them. That's not fair to the taxpayers. It's not fair to the community. What are the programs? What are the incentives? And how can we make things like this pencil out and work for developers? We heard loud and clear that people thought that this is something that should be for primary residents, people just generally who live in the community, workforce. There are other states that do that, but New Hampshire does have this in statute already, so it would be a matter of adding that into the tax code.
We kept coming up to the fact that zoning wasn't the problem. I think usually zoning becomes the problem that's limiting what people can do. And in this case, we're doing 117 units, and more or less, it works with Conway's zoning. So we're now to, and we'll probably talk more about this, but there are other things in the way, namely money. So really there's one thing in the way, namely money. But Conway's group has done amazing work. Some of the more permissive zoning in the state, they've removed a lot of barriers, and hopefully other towns go in that same direction.
I had friends who just came back from Orlando for a vacation. There were 5 add-on taxes to their hotel, restaurant bills, all the stuff there. So, I mean, other places are reaping revenue that we're not smart enough to buy into, which is too bad.
The trouble is, and I think this is even more acute this year when we have such a challenging budget environment, is that rooms and meals revenue is paying the state's bills.
Instead of adding a resort fee to those who are visiting our state, we're putting more taxes on the shoulders of the people who live here and work here.
So from an advocacy perspective, we will not be able to win this fight alone.
I feel inspired, I feel a little bit of fire about the project. I can see how the logistics are possible now, but to make the connection to an actual development still seems like it would take an angel.
There's no daylight between us on the substance here. It's really getting other communities and other town managers, other select board members to be advocating for this side by side with Conway, with Portsmouth. We need that strong coalition if we're ever going to get this done. Just them's the facts, in my opinion.
This year's Charrette highlighted exciting progress as well as real obstacles. We developed a design that reflected the community's desire for a mix of housing types, and encouragingly, the project would be allowable under current zoning. However, we found that the profit margin would be too low to attract a typical developer. When we reworked the plan to include only condo-style units, we found that an affordable project could be financially viable, but only under very specific conditions. It would likely require a mission-driven developer and a parcel with access to public water and sewer infrastructure that's limited in the valley, but the subject properties happen to have. The key takeaway was that zoning reform alone probably isn't enough. Conway has done great work to update its zoning, which we hope will inspire other towns in the MWV to consider their own land use regulations. However, creating the types of housing our region needs will almost certainly require financial support that we don't currently have. This points to a critical next step for the Housing Coalition, exploring what forms of financial support are working elsewhere and how we can replicate them here. We need to bring the right tools and partners to our region. The Charrette showed what's possible. Now we need to focus on building the support structures to make it real.